Hi, I'm Dr. John Grazel. I'm the Baha'i Chair for World Peace at the University of Maryland. And this particular clip is intended to establish sort of the empirical methodological basis behind our new site, Foundational Principles of Global Governance. Now, we explain on our site the methodology we use for really making our calculations and our estimations along our trajectories of what we call the foundational principle monitor. And that monitor measures one, the status of any particular foundational principle. Is it just emerging into consciousness? Is it an active, engaged use? Is it actually being applied? Or is it, in fact, being enforced as a standard? And it also asks the question, where does that foundational principle come in terms of people looking upon it as a final authority? What is the authority for accepting it as an authority? And basically, we identified four key types of authorities. One is what we call a logical authority. It makes sense. It could make sense scientifically or just makes common sense experientially. The second is what we call a humanistic authority. It does right things. It does the things that we feel are important. It serves and solves problems that gives us satisfaction. And the third criteria is what we call a spiritual criteria, that the source of authority is some sense of higher purpose and meaning and understanding that we have. And the last is what we call a religious authority, which means it's attached to a specific religious dogma and a particular authority that tells you what that dogma is and how it applies. And we measure each of our foundational principles according to those two trajectories. And the reason we do is because we believe that, one, it's very important to understand the differences in the foundational principles themselves and where they are, and to see the patterns and directions they're moving in, to understand what's happening and to engage them. But it's also important to understand the basis of their authorities, not only because that helps with the very dialogue itself, but because what we observe, and what is one of the hypotheses of the site, is that many of the disagreements and the actual conflicts that go beyond disagreement over foundational principles are really not about the principles. They're really about the authorities that people are relying on. And in many cases, the conflict is about my authority isn't being recognized, not so much as my authority's principle is not being recognized, because very often we find that a foundational principle can be held by different people based upon different authorities. So we track those. But behind this, there is yet another element, and I want to make that element very clear. And it's called truth, or more dramatically, the naked truth. Now, what do I mean by that? I don't mean that it's not a lie. It's not a purposeful, it's the opposite of a purposeful misrepresentation of what we know to be reality as we experience it. By truth, I mean that it's the whole truth. It's the situation, facts, understandings, analysis put together with all the different aspects within its context, exposing both what's known and what's not known, and the degree of certainty with which one is operating. The reason this is so critical is, in fact, we live in a world that is not operating in general according to that criteria. We live in a world that atomizes things, that segregates things out of their reality, that says, oh, if I'm in this particular academic discipline, I just look at this aspect of the problem. Other things are externalities. If I have a particular proponent of a theory, I use this theory. I don't recognize the other theory. If I'm involved in a legal case, I give the best argument based upon the evidence that suits my argument, and I sort of deny or don't look at the other evidence. All of these things work against the total truth, the true truth, the naked truth. And to impress this upon you, I just want to give you the awareness of where this phrase, the naked truth, actually comes from. Because you say it sounds very risque and, it sounds like you're dealing with an expose in the National Enquirer. But actually, the naked truth comes from an old Roman legend. It's one of my favorite legends. And the way the legend goes is that Truth, dressed in a beautiful cloth that she has woven, goes to the river to bathe. She takes off her cloth, she goes into the river. While she is bathing, Falsehood is hiding in the forest. Falsehood sees Truth's garment. She sneaks out. She steals Truth's garment and she replaces it with one of her own. Truth comes out of the river and she sees that her garment is gone, and what's there is a garment woven by Falsehood. But Truth triumphs because she says, I would rather go naked into the world than be dressed in a cloth woven of lies. Now, this concept of truth's triumphs is actually represented in quite a number of famous paintings, and statues of the naked truth actually exist in front of courthouses in various places in the United States and elsewhere in the world. But the idea that's behind it all is that truth, naked truth, reveals all, not just part. And naked truth requires us to accept and look at all. And that's what this site is going to work on as its empirical framework. What are as many of the relevant facts as we can? What is the context in which we have to put them? And what are the differences in understandings and opinions that exist around them? And so we welcome you and urge you to participate in this search, not only in terms of the subject matter, the foundational principles of global governance, but also in the spirit, which is the search for true and whole